Good afternoon, everyone. It is January 1st, 2022. It is New Year's Day, so it's a time of reckoning. So, what we're going to do in this monologue is we're going to look back at 2021. What are the highlights of the year? The things, not necessarily the things that were considered newsworthy at the time, but now in retrospect, what do we now consider newsworthy and important? Pivotal moments in history, if you will. So, I want to focus on three things, as I usually do with my monologue. So, we're going to talk first about the progressives, on the progressive agenda. So, if you recall, many years ago, there was the Me Too movement. So, that was predicated on the notion that there's a lot of rape, quote unquote, happening, and the women are not speaking up, and now women are just they're shedding their inhibitions, and that's it. We're not going to keep it in anymore, and we're just going to speak out, and we're going to bring justice and retribution to all these men who have harassed us over the years. As you can tell, I'm not very supportive of the movement. Okay, but that's a separate thing. I don't want to go into details right now. So the Me Too movement, interestingly enough, wasn't very strong this year. You didn't have a lot going on in this year, so it appears that that movement has subsided. Okay, the only person that was implicated in that, not in that movement directly, but what came out of that movement was Cuomo. So he was the only major figure that was brought down by sexual allegation or sexual assault allegations, whatever they call it. Okay, so and I'll get to that in a moment, possibly. But the other item on the progressive agenda was police brutality, if you will, or police action that has resulted in the killing of citizens unjustly. Now, so there are several incidents this year, or at least the prosecution of those incidents that took place. In the past, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, these incidents would not have sparked any significant backlash, let alone prosecution, let alone conviction. But this year, it has resulted in that. Derek Chauvin is a prime example. Kim Potter is also another example. In the case of Kim Potter, I believe she pulled her taser instead of her gun by accident, but she was also convicted. And there are other minor events. In part, the reason these events are more prominent now than in the past is because we have footage, both from citizens, witnesses on the scene, and we have body camera footage from the cops, and so these are things are more prominent now. I don't think they're happening in greater frequency now, but of course the progressives would beg to differ. They believe these are examples of racism. In some of these incidents, the victims are black and the police officer is white. In my view, it has absolutely nothing to do with racism. In fact, people mistakenly believed that the case of the recent case, what's the most recent one? Got already. Okay. Anyway, they believed that the perpetrator was white and the victim was black, which was not at all the case. It has to do with the Kenosha riots. I forgot the name of the person, but Rittenhouse, Kyle Rittenhouse, right? So Kyle Rittenhouse is an example, yeah. So like I said, in my view, this is a mistaken assumption, but of course the progressives, they have their own fantasy worldview, and they promulgate these beliefs and these narratives, but it has nothing to do with black versus white. It's purely a question of how do police react to incidents. And I actually do agree that in the past, the police have been too aggressive. And they still are, by the way. They still are. They still are too aggressive. They are trained to be aggressive. They are trained to be defensive and fearful for their lives. And of course, if it weren't somewhat justified, it wouldn't be the case. But the problem is they're not using good judgment. It's really a question of judgment, in my opinion. And a lot of these cases where people wind up dying, not all, but in a lot of them, they use poor judgment. They just use poor judgment. They escalate for no reason. I'll just give you one example. I mean, this, by the way, did not catch a lot of attention, But there's a case of a woman, police officer. They went into a what they call a welfare visit. Is that what they call it? Welfare visit? Not sure. But basically, what it is somebody calls in, hey, we're concerned about this person. He's not coming out of the house. Something might be going on. I'm smelling something, whatever. And so they go, they knock on the door, and if nobody answers, they enter and they try to see what's going on with this person. Maybe he's unconscious. Who knows what's going on? So this was an elderly, retired cop, actually. So the officer came in. She kept announcing, "Hey, police officer, officer, sheriff's department," and he never answered. Finally, after a few minutes, he is in his room and he says, "I have a gun. Leave." "Who is this?" "I have a gun." And then he comes out with his gun. The officer orders him to put down the gun. He doesn't. And then he takes out his gun and and the officer shoots him and he dies. So this is an example where, poor judgment. Why is it poor judgment? Because this person is not suspected of any crime. You're allowed to have a gun in your own house, and you're allowed to defend your house and your property against an intruder, including a police officer. Right? Just because you're police doesn't mean you're allowed to enter someone's property. And if that person is telling you leave, you must leave. Or at least from that person's perspective, you should leave. And so why are you taking out why didn't you just leave? Yeah, he has a gun. Yes, you're going to be just leaving with your tail between your legs. And so, yeah, doesn't look good, but that's what you should be doing. And to avoid bloodshed, this person is in his own house. He's obviously okay, right? He's responding to you, so he's not unconscious. There's nothing wrong. Maybe he's whatever. You have no business staying here at this point, especially when he's threatening you on his own property, right? He's asking you to leave, and he's threatening you that he would use his weapon if you don't leave. So leave. If she weren't a cop, she would leave. Of course she would leave, right? So why aren't you leaving? You've done your job, leave. So there's just one example of poor judgment. So anyway, I do agree that there is a problem with poor judgment, but I don't like the way the progressives frame it. They always frame it in a racial way, in a gender way. They always go with the identity card, and that's something I very much detest. And unfortunately, I don't think that there's a whole lot of good going to come out of this. In other words, that the cops will be more careful in the way they initiate stops, the reason they initiate them, how they execute them. I'm not sure. I think that it's actually doing possibly more harm than good, but if anything, it's just balancing out in terms of the cops being more afraid of acting when they should be acting, right? And then possibly, all kinds of bad things could happen when you overreact. Okay, I mean, you saw the French Revolution, right? So not good. Anyway, moving on. Second thing that is notable for this year is the economy. Okay, so which I'm going to tie this in to politics as well. The economy and politics, meaning this is the first year of the Biden administration. So overall, if you're looking back, a broad sweep of the year, if you take a broad sweep of the year and you look at Biden versus Trump, I think if you are non-political, if you're politically independent, you're not just politically minded, you're not tribally loyal, D versus R doesn't mean anything to you. And if you look back, you gotta admit, Biden's year was a failure. I think the most notable thing that has come out of the economy this year is inflation, which has hurt everyone. It's very bad for everyone. I mean, personally, for me, I'm a plumber, and everything, the prices have gone up, and I don't like this. Obviously, I'm gonna have to, upcharge it to my customers, so it's not gonna affect, or at least it shouldn't hypothetically affect my bottom line. But I don't want to have to do that. And it's just never pleasant for me to have to raise the prices and the customers are looking, oh, why did the prices go up? And I have to explain it. It's not good. It's not good for anyone. It's not good for anyone. And what caused this inflation, of course, in my opinion, the mainstream media / establishment is never going to admit this, but it's all the stimulus spending that we've been doing. So, make no mistake, when you are giving people more money, there is an infusion of money into people's bank accounts, they're going to spend it. So you have more spending, and at the same time, you have these restrictions from coronavirus lockdowns that are still in place. So you have the perfect storm here of people trying to spend money, and the supply just isn't there. Okay, the supply isn't there. They've curtailed shipping, they've curtailed labor, all kinds of things that are necessary to produce the kind of things that people want. It's just not there. So that's just a perfect recipe for prices going up. Very bad. And it's just completely dumb on the Biden administration's part not to foresee this. This is just rudimentary economics. They should not have done this. The stimulus wasn't necessary. In my opinion, none of it was necessary. But if anything, okay, Trump already did one stimulus. And by the way, I'm against that too. I don't think any stimulus should have been done. Certainly not at the federal level, because the federal government never required any shutdowns. Yes, there was 15 days to slow the spread. Okay, but other than that, there was no mandatory shutdown of economy under the federal aegis, and so you're just not responsible. The federal government is not responsible for this, and so a lot of this is demagoguery and populistic type of posturing, and it's just not good for the country in the long term. It looks good in the short term, and maybe voters are going to reward you with at the ballot box, but it's not good. It's not good. You don't do this. So I think this is basically the legacy of this year in terms of the Biden administration. I don't see anything else of interest, really. Of course, there's a lot of other things that have been done in terms of the vaccine. They legalized it for minors, and the booster shots. There's all kinds of other things. And of course, the Build Back Better, which of course died. So that's not going to be notable historically speaking. That legislation is dead. There was the infrastructure bill which passed, but I don't think there's anything notable there. So the only thing essentially lasting out of this year, politically / economically, is the inflation. And it's terrible. It's a mistake. And it's very irksome and annoying and not good. And it happened, by the way, this year. The entire thing happened this year. For some reason, it should have theoretically started under Trump, but it didn't. But certainly Biden made it worse in his policies. So there's that. Number 3. So we talked about the progressive obsession with police brutality. We talked about the economy and the Biden administration. What else is there? Is there something else? Number 3. Okay, let's talk about, I think, the coronavirus / vaccine. I think that's the third one. Yeah, the third one. Okay. So the coronavirus. And now we have the Omicron. So now it's I think the third legacy of this year is that people are tired of coronavirus lockdowns. That's, I think, the legacy this year. I think the first year, 2020, a lot of people panicked. Of course, they didn't panic on their own. The media caused them to panic. So 24/7, if you watch CNN, MSNBC, the mainstream media sources, they kept hammering away about coronavirus, the pandemic. People are dying. Every day you would look on TV and you would see, oh, it's up. There's a ticker symbol, right? How many people have died? How many people are going to die? What are the expected? What are the... So this caused a lot of panic in people, and this in turn caused politicians to cave in to demands of very severe measures that were hoped would mitigate the severity of the pandemic. So I think what happened this year, this was 2020, what happened this year is that people have gotten over it, and they just don't want it anymore. So for whatever reason, now, the real reason why they shouldn't want it is that the measures are not really effective, plus the coronavirus is not as deadly as it was initially feared. Remember the initial reports of 3%? And I immediately, when everyone was still extremely afraid, 3%, oh my God, 3 out of 100 people are going to die. That was the report in Italy. And of course, that was just part of the fear-mongering from the media. Of course, they knew it, or they should have known, even at that time, that this is not something that can in any way be extrapolated to the population at large. This was just a very small sample from a small population, very elderly population, and that's the absolute worst-case scenario. But people didn't know it at the time. I knew it, that it was not representative, and there was a panic going on. But at this point, everyone knows it. Everyone knows it that you live with it. You get it, you recover, you move on, you take the vaccine, you don't take the vaccine, mask. People are just not want. They don't want to do it anymore. Okay, in as much as people suffer, then let them suffer, and we have to move on with life. We can't just completely alter our lives and restrict ourselves excessively because of this. That's essentially the lesson learned in 2021. It's actually quite amazing that I just took an RV trip and I did a lot of events and people were not socially distancing anymore. And a year ago this time, this would not have even been legal in many states. I'm not sure about Florida. Florida probably it is legal, but it certainly wouldn't have been practiced. Sometimes the local authorities banned it, but it certainly by convention it wouldn't have been acceptable. Um, I'm referring specifically in my mind. I'm referring to a boat ride, right? There was a boat tour that I took. Everyone's sitting together, and there was other events, tons of other events that I've experienced, and just people are just. It's interesting that I went to also Wild Adventures. Oh, that's the other thing I was referring to. That's in Georgia, in South Georgia, near the border with Florida. So I was there. That's an adventure park slash theme park with rides. And again, almost nobody was wearing a mask or socially distancing. The only people who were wearing a mask were the staff, the workers, which was really odd. Like, I was thinking to myself, like, obviously they're required to do it, right? Because everyone was wearing it. And I was thinking to myself, like, whom are you placating here? Whom are you satisfying? The science certainly isn't there, obviously, okay? The science isn't there. The people are not doing it. Only the staff is doing it. Why? So there might be like one or two out of 500 neurotic people who still think that the mask is somehow going to be the savior of mankind, and you got to wear a mask when you're outdoors in an adventure park. Are you really just tailoring your policy to soothe those people? Like, it bothered me. It just bothered me that a lot of times you see corporate policy that is just dumb. Like, it just doesn't serve anyone. They just do it. It seems to be like a knee-jerk reaction. Like, oh, we've got to be safe. We got to project this imagery of safety. But they're not really accomplishing anything. They're just inconveniencing the staff. Nobody thinks, oh, this is a safe place because the staff are wearing masks. Outdoors. Remember, almost everything is outdoors. It's just silly. But anyway, so the coronavirus, essentially, that's what it defines this year, is that people have chilled out. The booster shots, a lot of people have just, who took the original shot, sometimes they took the booster, but sometimes they correctly feel like this is an endless thing. And I say correctly because, yeah, it's the immunity wears off. Whether you get it naturally or you get it from a vaccine, it wears off after a few months and you can still get it again. And that's the other thing that people realize, that it's not as effective as it was initially touted. And so it's just the benefit of it is just a lot less than it appears. And that's essentially, of course, the government will never admit that. The government under Fauci swears by the vaccine. That's it. That is the cure, right? That is the cure. And they don't accept any other alternative to it. You gotta get the vaccine. Natural immunity doesn't register. Therapeutics doesn't register. Of course, they actually actively campaigned against it. But anyway, so that's the government. But the people are singing a different tune. To them, they're doing what they always do. And like I said, if you watch the media and if you listen to the elites, then you wouldn't. It would belie the sensibilities of the actual people. So again, to summarize, the three things, the legacy of this year is the trials against police officers for killing citizens, and number two is the economy and the new Biden administration, what it accomplished or didn't accomplish, and number three is the people's reaction to the Wuhan coronavirus and the government response thereto. Thank you for watching, and have a great year. Bye-bye.